Welcome everyone to the next STRUM Method sessions. In today's video, we're going to be going over the 3 A's of transitioning. Transitioning is probably the most requested subject for beginning guitar players, and so today we're going to be giving you our 3 techniques that we call the 3 A's of transitioning to help you focus so we can really start honing in on better transitions. So what are those 3 A's of transitioning? The first one's going to be allowing, which is allowing ourselves to focus on different types of practice within the transitions. What that means is often as beginner students, we think that we have to be perfect at what our chords sound like while we're trying to practice on transitions, or make sure that our transitions are perfect when we're trying to focus on what our chords sound like. And what I'm here to tell you is that they're different practices. We need to definitely make sure when we're practicing chords we can hear every single note clearly. And we need to make sure when we're practicing transitions that we're getting to that next chord on time or in rhythm, because that's essentially what we're practicing when practicing transitions. Which is often why you hear use a metronome. It's because it forces you to get there on that downbeat. The next A in our 3 A's of transitioning is anchoring, and that is when we use a specific finger while we're using a chord to push down, and again, I'm going to be getting all into this in just a second, but pushing down with one of our fingers, using it as a pivot or an anchor, lifting up all the other fingers and allowing them to move more freely to find that next chord. And then the last A in our 3 A's of transitioning is going to be anticipating. And that is anticipating what that next chord is before it happens. A very common mistake is focusing on that current chord and that current strum pattern. Totally understandable. But we don't think about that next chord until it's too late, until we're supposed to be down strumming on that next chord. And by then we've already missed it. So we need to start moving to that next chord just before the downbeat and anticipate what it's going to be so that we can get there in time. So let's look a little bit more into how we should practice transitioning using the STRUM Method's 3 A's of transitioning. Okay, so the first tip that we're going to be covering today is called anchoring. And that's again when we use one or more fingers to maintain pressure on the fretboard, allowing the other fingers to lift up and find their placement on that next chord more easily. Now, if I'm moving from the D chord to the E chord, or the D major to E major, we have our first finger on the 3rd string, second finger on the 1st string, 3rd finger on the 2nd string. When I transition to that E chord, the one finger that doesn't move strings is that 1st finger. It only slides down the neck 1 fret. So this is going to be our anchor in this transition, allowing these other 2 fingers to move up and find their placements more easily. So again, we're playing that D chord. When we transition to the E chord, our 2nd and 3rd fingers pick up. Our 1st finger, maintaining pressure, slides down the neck to the 1st fret, and then our 2nd and 3rd finger find their corresponding notes to create that E chord. This is the concept of anchoring when you find one finger that doesn't need to move around different strings. Another really good example is going from the D chord to the G chord. The 3rd finger doesn't move strings or frets. So we're playing a D. Our 1st and 2nd finger pick up, using our 3rd finger as an anchor, and find themselves up on the correct notes and frets and strings to create that G chord. Our pinky comes down just below it to create that G. Notice our 3rd finger never moved in that transition, making it our anchor. Again, D chord, 1st and 2nd finger lift up, 3rd finger maintains pressure, pinky comes down, 1st and 2nd fingers come down on their correct strings and frets, making that G chord, again, using that 3rd finger as our anchor. So you may be asking yourself, well, what do I do if my fingers all have to move to different strings entirely to get to that next chord? What we have to do is find the fingers that move the least amount, move those first, and then allow our other fingers to fill in. So going from that E to the A major chord, notice none of our fingers stay on the same strings. And then all fingers have to come to new strings. So what we do here is we're on our E major. Notice our second and third fingers to get to that A major only have to move down one string each. So these are going to be the fingers that I move first, just to move these down one string, allowing our index finger to move up, and then our pinky finger to follow suit underneath that ring finger. So again, E major chord. To transition, our second and third finger move down one string first, and then our index finger and pinky follow right behind it. So now that chord progression, D to E to A major, again we can use our index finger to anchor from the D to the E, and then use our second and third fingers, first priority getting to that next string, moving down one, and then our index finger and pinky follow right behind it. So adding a simple strum pattern should sound like this. D, index finger slides down, second, third fingers pick up and go to that next string. That's the concept of anchoring. All right, so tip number 2 with transitioning chords with more ease is going to be anticipation of that next chord. Again, I'll be using the chord progression D, E, and A major. I'll be doing 4 down strums each. Now, it's common for new players to want to play each chord clearly and distinctly before moving to that next chord. What I mean by that is from the D, we do 4 down strums, 2, 3, 4. They want to hear every note clearly before moving to that E major to do 4 down strums. I'm here to tell you on that 3rd down strum, before we get to that 4th, I'm already starting to think about where I'm heading. Where is that next chord going to be? I'm anticipating that next chord. So that on that 4th down strum, as soon as I strum, I'm already moving to that next chord, not necessarily allowing that 4th strum to ring out. You have to give yourself some time to get to that next chord. So going from the D major, 1, 2, I'm already thinking of the E major, and on that 4th down strum, I'm moving. I'm not allowing for a long sustained ringing out of that 4th strum before moving to that A major. I move right after I strum. 1, 2, 3, 4, move. 2, 3, here comes the A, 4, move. Notice how I anticipated before. Here comes the D. 2, 3, move. 1, 2, 3, move. 2, 3, 4. So again, anticipation is thinking about the next chord that you're going to be moving to before that final strum, before you have to move to that next chord. And then not waiting for that 4th strum or the final strum to sustain and ring out before moving, but moving right after that final strum, giving yourself enough time to get there to come right down on that downbeat. All right, and the 3rd tip on how to transition chords with more ease for today is to know what you're practicing when you're practicing. What I mean by that is there are multiple different types of practicing the guitar, and we can't do them all at once. One type of practice is making sure your chords sound clear. Every string rings out with no buzzing or muting sounds. You might recall in past videos using the D major chord, I have wanted you to play every string singular first and then strum in order to hear if there's any muting or buzzing going on. So for a D major chord, strings 1 through 4, we would play each note singular first, and then strum, making sure there's no buzzing or fretting or muting going on. The second type of practice is what we're doing today, and that's transitioning. Don't get hung up on the perfect quality of every string when we're practicing transitioning. They're two different types of practice. So again, going from that D to the E to the A, using that, anchoring that first tip, and anticipating that next chord with that second tip. Don't get hung up if the chords have a little bit of buzzing or muting sounds when we're practicing transitioning. So again, I'm going D major, 2, 3, and now I'm already moving. 2, 3, 4, moving. 2, 3, 4. You might even be lifting your fingers up off of the fretboard, moving to that next chord on your fourth down strum in order to allow you enough time to get to that next chord. That's okay. It could even sound something like this. 1, 2. Obviously that last chord doesn't sound good if I just sit on it. But that's because I'm moving to that E major chord to come down on the right note. So playing it with even time should sound like this. 1, 2, 3, move. 2, 3, 4. I'm not getting hung up on any buzzing or muting sounds that any of those chords are giving out because currently I'm practicing transitions, making sure I'm getting to that next chord on that downbeat. So again, we got 3 tips on how to transition chords with more ease. Obviously, it's going to come in time, but to practice getting there on time, the first step is using anchoring, finding that finger that doesn't move strings or moves the least amount, using that as the pressure to allow your other fingers to pick up off the fretboard and find their location on that next chord most efficiently. The next tip is going to be anticipation, thinking about that next chord before it's time to transition, and transitioning right after we make that final strum on that previous chord, not waiting for it to ring out. And lastly, don't worry about perfection on the sound of your chords when practicing transitions. There are 2 different types of practice. Practice for 5 to 10 minutes a day on your chords to make sure every note sounds clear and concise, and then practice 5 to 10 minutes a day using a metronome or other abilities to help you transition to those other chords with more ease. Alright, so that's going to do it for this video and these 3 new tips for helping you transition chords with more ease. Every guitar coach is going to tell you your transitions will come in time, and that is true, but if we focus on these 3 tips, hopefully we can increase that progress a little bit quicker. Again, we have anchoring, using 1 or a couple more fingers to push down on the fretboard, allowing your other fingers to pick up to find their locations more easily. Second is anticipating that next chord coming before it's time to transition. And last, know what you're practicing when you're practicing. Sometimes we're practicing chord clarity, other times we're practicing transitioning to that next chord.